Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the District 34 House of Representatives Virtual Town Hall. My name is Malcolm Chapman and I've partnered with Elevate Rapid City to moderate today's event. We are excited that you chose to spend part of your afternoon with this session as we invite local legislative candidates to share their platform, their ideas, and their story. In these uncertain times, public meetings and traditional campaign events are difficult to facilitate. So we hope that these webinars can help serve as the public's opportunity to hear from candidates themselves. Today, we have joining us in the race for District 34 State House of Representatives are Mike Derby, a Republican running for District 34 House, Jess Olson, who we expect will be here shortly, a Republican running for District 34 House, and Rick Strzelecki, a Democrat running for District 34 House. Jody Fry and Nick Anderson are the other two candidates running for this seat, but they are not joining us this afternoon. As a reminder, Mike Derby, Jess Olson, and Jody Fry are the three candidates facing a Republican primary on June 2nd. Just a little bit about my background. I'm a former city council member, a former Marine enlisted and Marine officer, and I facilitate and speak across the country and I'm just excited to be here today with all of you. I hope that you and your families are safe and healthy in these uncertain times. I would like to set the stage for this town hall. We are first going to introduce each candidate in alphabetical order, and they'll have 5 minutes to introduce themselves. As the candidates run through their introductions, the audience is encouraged to submit questions through the question and answer feature found on your screen. Once introductions are finished, I will begin to share questions that are received from the audience through the Q&A. Each candidate will have the chance to respond. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to provide their answer before we move to the next candidate. We will rotate who has the first chance to respond. We have the ability to export all questions that are submitted through the Q&A. So if your specific question is not read aloud, we encourage the candidates to reach out after the webinar and answer your question directly. We will do our best to ask and answer as many questions as time allows. We will conclude once the stream of questions expires or we reach the time limit. There are 2 questions we sent the candidates ahead of time to prepare. I will cover these topics if not prompted by the audience's questions. We will conclude promptly at 4 p.m. to be respectful of everyone's schedule. Finally, I'd like to set some guidelines. As a reminder, the only questions received through the Q&A feature will be submitted to me as the moderator to ask the candidates. We will not address questions sent through the chat feature. I, as the moderator, will strictly enforce the time limits, and I will hold up a red card after when the candidate has 30 seconds remaining. After 2 minutes, each candidate will be muted so that they can move on to the next candidate or the next question. Most importantly, we ask that you treat all candidates and other webinar attendees with respect. If you abuse the Zoom chat feature in an inappropriate or derogatory manner, we reserve the right to dismiss you from the Zoom webinar. So with that, let's get started. Mike, you can start us off with your 5-minute introduction.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. Everybody hear me okay? I'd like to first thank Elevate for this opportunity. What a great format, what a great opportunity. One thing Malcolm didn't mention is he's going to be a new author. I can't wait to get that book out and read it. Congratulations, Malcolm. But once again, I'm Mike Derby. My roots go deep in District 34. As a matter of fact, I went to Meadowbrook Grade School, West Junior High when they had junior highs, Stevens High School, and I'd like to give a shout out to Stevens High School. I hear they were ranked one of the top high schools in the country recently, so that's pretty cool. I just recently, last year, purchased my mother's house that I grew up in, that she bought 50 years ago in 1969, where I was living at the time of the flood as a kid. So we've got those memories of the flood, and there'll be some anniversaries coming up, and there's fewer and fewer of us that live in Rapid City that were here during the flood. I graduated, I went to USD, a business administration degree, and married my wife Carmen. We'll be celebrating our 37th anniversary shortly. And we've got 2 daughters, and 2 granddaughters. They all live in Minneapolis, and we sure miss them, as everybody does. Misses kids and family and friends. Just a sidebar, Danielle's husband is a chemical engineer, graduated from the School of Mines. Hello, Representative Olson, welcome. And one of our goals is to get him back to Rapid City. So looking for platforms and opportunities for a chemical engineer to come back to Rapid City, and hopefully we can make that happen. Also, another side note, speaking of Meadowbrook Grade School, been involved with junior achievement for 20 years. Actually piloted the first class in Rapid City 20 years ago, and it was my daughter's 4th grade class at Meadowbrook. So that's kind of how I keep track of time now. And I know Malcolm's been a big supporter of JA over the years, and thank you for everybody that's been a part of that. Currently, I'm a small business owner. I've been a small business owner for over 30 years. My wife and I own the Canyon Lake Resort. Gone through a lot of changes and transformation over the years, but we're excited where we're at. Just like everybody else, we're trying to figure out what's going to happen for the tourism season, when we're going to open. We were on track for our best year ever. And of course, we cater to family reunions, and for the most part, those have all canceled, but every business has their stories, and I understand it. I've been going through the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the Small Business Express Loan. So I feel for everybody in small business, but we're going to get through it. We've got brighter days ahead, and working together, we're going to get there. One of the things I've been involved with in the business is tourism. Obviously, we're a tourism-based industry. I'm currently on the board of Visit Rapid City. Been involved with Convention and Visitors Bureau prior to that, and go to the South Dakota Tourism Conventions in Pierre on a regular basis. Although I was never in the military service or a veteran, I certainly appreciate those that have served our country, and I've done my part to try and help in that with being involved with Ellsworth Air Force Base. I'm a past chairman of the Ellsworth Task Force. I was heavily involved when the Base Realignment and Closure Commission was looking at closing Ellsworth. I was also a past chairman of the Military Affairs Committee, and I'm a current member of the Military Affairs Committee. The one thing that I do bring to the table, and I was proud to be a part of the legislature. I served 6 years, 3 terms under the Janklow administration. I was vice chairman my last term, and so I'm very involved, understand the legislative process, been there, and have gone back to Pierre on a regular basis since then. So look forward to representing District 34 again. And if you want more information about Mike Derby, you can go to my website, MikeDerby4SDHouse.com. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. And Jess, how are you, and welcome. I know you didn't hear the instructions, but you will have 5 minutes to introduce yourself. When you see the red card, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. We'll rotate how the questions are asked, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer a question. And then the red card again will indicate 30 seconds remaining. And you have at least 5 minutes now to introduce yourself. Welcome, Jess.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
I'm Jess Olson. I'm your current legislator for District 34, and I serve in the House of Representatives. And it's been my honor and privilege to be in the legislature and hear from South Dakotans in our district and across the state. So a little bit about what I've done so far in the last 2 years. I've served on the Education Committee, and I've served on the Tax Committee. And while we're a very low tax state, it's still a very interesting committee to hear all of the ideas and from all of the businesses, and to really streamline that process so that when we do have proposals, we make sure we're looking out for small businesses and not introducing anything that would be overly burdensome. And then on the Education Committee, that's very near and dear to my heart as a mom of 3 little kiddos, 2 of whom, one attends Meadowbrook and then one will be joining Meadowbrook. As a kindergartner this fall, which is pretty exciting, we we know how important education is and how much that those that our legislation affects us, and it affects my family every day. So I keep that in mind. And then I'm sorry, I have a little bit of allergies going on. So with my background in healthcare and working in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors, it's been very important to me as a legislator to keep in mind businesses. And I started my own small business. And so I know what it's like to create jobs and build workforce. And also, having worked in a nonprofit that served teenagers for 6 years, I've seen what it's like when the state passes legislation or works with contracts, or how those departments interact. And I was pleased during that time to work across the state with entities from corrections to education, juvenile justice, in healthcare, Medicaid, all of those different pieces and how they interplayed, and to see the agencies. And so that really gave me insight as I entered as a legislator, and to craft better legislation and ask tougher questions. And that same thing happens in the education committee, just like in the medical field, where you have a lot of complex issues. You need to ask those questions and think not just one step, but 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of how these pieces of legislation would impact people. And then as far as small businesses, I'm very proud that our state is a place where small businesses can thrive, and we try and keep that red tape low. It's helped me as a business owner start my business. And so I keep that in mind in general. And that fiscal conservatism is something that's very important to me, because we are a state and we should be proud of our AAA bond rating. And that helps communities, it helps school districts, and it helps the people of South Dakota who've had pensions and worked for this state. So those are some of my priorities as a legislator that I look at. And I was very, very pleased and honored that Elevate recognized me as a business champion with the legislation that we passed this last year. So I think that I bring a very personal touch, being a mom and a business owner and someone who's worked in many different fields with people across the state. And I really hope that I get reelected so that I can continue that work and support the people who work every day to make South Dakota the best, so that we can keep doing that. Thank you.
Jess, thank you. And Rick.
Open my mic. Can you hear me okay? Good. Okay. I am Rick Strachman-Lersey, also a candidate for the House from District 34. I've lived in Rapid City for 29 years cumulatively, with some early time years, several early years in the early 80s, but I've been here for 26 years since moving from Albuquerque in 1994. I have had some wonderful opportunities to serve in healthcare leadership for our community. I was the longtime CEO of Western Providers, a managed care company associated with Monument Health and our community's providers, physicians, and related personnel. I retired in 2017 from there. I provided during those years financial and operational leadership and planning for the organizations I was involved in, including Western Providers and Regional Health. Prior to that, I spent 11 years in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in leadership roles with Presbyterian Healthcare, including the development and operation of the Presbyterian Health Plan, which was remains a very successful and key element of the private healthcare system in the state of New Mexico. Now I've had the opportunity, after being retired for several years, I got an invitation to serve in a financial and budget leadership role for Oyate Health on the Susan campus. And I began work there in late October of this year. This is an exciting role, an exciting job, and I think an exciting future for healthcare for our Native people. I am very engaged in the community and very committed to it. I am the treasurer and board member of the Community Health Center. the community health center offers such enormous opportunity for people who otherwise could not afford care to get the care that they need and have a good entry point into the medical system. In addition to that, I'm on the Salvation Army Advisory Board here in the Black Hills, and I believe in this organization as a channel of good, and in fact, as the organization, as it says, trying to do the most good. I'm on the board of the Community Services Connection, which is a healthcare and social services advisory board. And I'm on the boards of Early Childhood Connections and Starting Strong, which are key elements in our continuing development of solutions for early childhood education. It's a pleasure to serve on these boards. In addition to that, I had served as a member of the state's high-risk health insurance advisory board under the Dugard administration. This was an exciting and challenging role and an exciting organization to work with as we were trying to find ways to provide healthcare funding for people who otherwise were not eligible for health insurance due to pre-existing conditions. That's been supplanted by the Affordable Care Act. We'll talk later about the issues there. I'm committed to healthcare and education, but I've engaged in small business activity and small business ownership. I know from experience that it's not easy. I had a retail business in Rushmore Mall. I've had a mail order crafts business, and I continue to have an ownership position in a marketing company for healthcare services and in healthcare consulting. I'm originally from Boston. I've spent most of my early years in Boston, Southern Connecticut, and New York. I did get my education at Harvard and Yale. I am a person of faith, trying to do what is right, trying daily to become a better person. And it is a daily progression. I have been married for 38 years to Frances Strike.
Rick, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but your 5 minutes for your introduction is up. We'll go with our first round of questions. And Jess, we'll start with you for the first 2 minutes. You get 2 minutes, and then with 30 seconds remaining, I'll hold up the red card and you should start winding down. Our first question is, current government leadership is finding strategies to handle the pandemic. How do you feel about their response, and what, if anything, would you do differently?
Thank you for that question. And I think it's a difficult thing to address. We've seen a lot of different approaches. I've had to take an approach in my own business because I run a healthcare company, and we were planning ahead early and being very precautionary. So we've been fortunate in our own community that this has not been here yet. I think in part because we're remote, and in part because we've put into place all of those precautions. Having been involved in a lot of the questions and hearing directly about some of the planning, I know very, very early on education was a key issue, and you had superintendents asking questions and wanting to plan, in particular with school closures for children who wouldn't be eating. And so I think that's very, very heartwarming to see people concerned, not just about the education, but the overall well-being of people and these kids in our community. I think I would have preferred a little bit more of a middle of the road approach where you plan. And so I appreciate that we haven't limited our rights, but I also think when the state did less, the smaller communities had to do more, and a unified approach and a little bit more strong crisis communications might have helped mitigate some of that, especially because I do have a degree in this. I've studied healthcare administration. I've studied crisis communications, and early and often communication is key. So it helps people, especially who don't have that background. And that would have been something I would have done differently. Thank you. Malcolm, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Rick, the same question, and I can read it again. Current government leadership is finding strategies to handle the pandemic. How do you feel about their response, and what, if anything, would you do differently?
Well, like Jess, I believe that early communication is key, and we just have not gotten the pieces of activity that we need nationally in place to get this pandemic managed. But in South Dakota, we have some special problems. We do not have Medicaid expansion. Now more than ever, we need this for the coronavirus solutions. The fact is, we've got tens of thousands of working people in this state who don't have health insurance and who need to continue to take care of themselves and those who depend on them. People shouldn't be afraid to go to the doctor, take care of problems before they become catastrophes. I'm tired of hearing that we shouldn't do this for able-bodied adults. These are our families, our neighbors, our friends, and our co-workers. What on earth are we thinking? Now we're paying for it. In addition to that, we've lost opportunities financially as a result of this. The Medicaid expansion would bring over $300 million into our state economy per year. It might cost us $30 million to do so, but that's smart investment. We'll talk more about this.
Thank you, Rick. Mike, same question. Would you like for me to read it again? Mike?
Yes.
Current government leadership is finding strategies to handle the pandemic. How do you feel about their response, and what, if anything, would you do differently?
Well, I think it goes without saying that we're in uncharted waters. And I do appreciate Governor Noem keeping us up to date on a daily basis. We're all in this together. I do appreciate the fact that she's looking at how can we better utilize the $600 million that's coming from the feds. And if we could carve off half of that to be used for related pandemic issues versus just specific pandemic issues, it would help all of us. Wow, it's a tough situation. It's easy to criticize someone for making decisions and being forward. I honestly don't have a lot that I would say that needs to be done. We need to all follow our social distancing guidelines. We need to be safe. My employees, I take care of them and make sure we check every day with everybody if there's any other issues. Move forward. And let's get this state back on track. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. Our next question will go with Rick, and then Mike, and then Jess. So the question is, what is your position concerning general education? And again, we'll start with Rick.
Okay. Education is something we need to keep investing in. The fact of the matter is, we need to continue to invest from preschool education all the way up through higher ed. We don't have an early education council in this state. I believe we need to form one in this next session. And several of our legislators from West River have supported this. I know that I certainly would continue to push for it. In addition to that, we need to be continuing to find ways to support our teachers in K through 12 education. And finally, we need to make an effort to increase funding to our higher education system. Fact is, today it is very frightening for people to take on the costs of higher ed, and I don't know of any better investment in the future than education. So let's find a way to do it, make it happen.
Rick, thank you. Mike, same question. What is your position concerning general education issues?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm a product of public education, as I mentioned before, right through grade school, through Stevens High School. Having been a product, I also went back into the classrooms with junior achievement, and I have great appreciation for what the teachers do. As an appropriator, education takes up a big chunk of the budget, the general funds budget. And I know that's going to be a big discussion coming up. I'm sure there's a special session coming up in regards to budget. Do you keep the 2% increase in play? Do you roll it back? Do you look at FTEs? And FTEs are full-time employment. Now that has to do more with, I think, the higher education and the fact that we're in a pandemic. People are taking a look at new opportunities for education, and maybe there's some things we can do on a higher level. But education obviously is very important. I can't say enough for the teachers that do what they do on a daily basis. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. Jess.
Thank you. This is a great question. It's very comprehensive. And having served on the education committee, I really got a really close look at a lot of the issues that our state faces. And we do spend over 50% of our budget on education. So what that tells me is that people of South Dakota think that education is important. And I know that that's true. My dad was a teacher, and I was very pleased to go through several different school districts, but go through the public education and go on to an Ivy League college. So I was very well prepared by the schools we have here in South Dakota. And so that's something that I think is important to see, that our schools remain competitive. And you just got to see that Stevens was ranked very high across the state and nationally. And so we have excellent schools here, and we want to keep that competitive advantage. So when I look at that, I look at how do we teach for the 21st century? And that's a lens I apply when I'm looking at the ways we can support our school districts and our teachers. I also think that part of that is, and when we talk about local control, our schools get to set curriculum and figure out how to meet those standards. And they do it in a really creative way to meet each community's needs. And so Pure does some different things with math, and we have the science program at Stevens that's phenomenal. So those are important pieces, but I also look at workforce development, because we not only want to be looking at how do we get kids through school with the best skills, but how does that translate into jobs? And so I was pleased this last year to support the transition to from technical school to technical college, so that we can really appeal to kids on multiple different paths and get kids working and having those careers, whether it's after a full 4-year university or they go in to be an electrician or a plumber. So I look at that full spectrum of the skills they need and the careers they can have.
Yes, thank you. Our next question will start with Mike, and then we'll go to Jess, and then end up with Rick. The question is, what will your approach be to state budget decisions that will likely require budget program cuts given the economic challenges as a result of COVID-19? What are your priorities for funding? We'll start with Mike.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. That's going to be the big topic moving forward, coming up. And having been an appropriator and on appropriations for 6 years, I understand the process. I understand how you gather information. I understand where the information comes from. And understandably, as a candidate, we need more information. We need to bring some information to the special session, to our appropriators. And actually, I'm going to turn this on the head. I would like to see a survey, probably done by Elevate or comparable organization, but I think Elevate's the perfect people to do it, and ask questions. Do we dive into the rainy day fund? There's 172 million in two funds there for that. Do we look at alternative sources of tax revenue? Years ago and periodically, we've increased gas taxes periodically. You know, that's a question we need to ask people. Where do they stand on issues like that? Are you in favor of across the board budget cuts, or look at each department individually? I think that's a big deal. It's hard to do across the board cuts, but we need the time and the effort to take a look at each budget individually, and I think that's a big deal. Where are we at with the big three and the funding, the 2% across the board? That's a question I would like to ask in regards to our constituents. And let's gather this information and present it so we have a voice, we have a seat at the table. And you know, I'll just close with zero-based budgeting. We've talked about that forever, and maybe now's the time. We do it in business. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. Jess, would you like for me to read it again?
No, I think I have it. And I think it's a great question to ask, what are our priorities? And we need to see, and we won't know that for a couple of months after talking to the appropriators, where we're at and what the impact will be and what could be offset by from the three phases of the stimulus package. As far as my priorities, I think that I want to look at additional revenue. And I know that can seem like an odd thing at this time, but we do have this opportunity, especially West River, to support our Ellsworth base. And with that expansion, we will see significant investment in our community through road construction, housing, and education. And so that's something that our whole state will benefit from. And I brought a resolution this last year to support that and to show that support as we negotiate that. It's going to be really important that we stay on track with that, because that can bring in a lot of money for our state budget to help offset any costs that we loss in revenue that we face. And you know, we faced this last year, some real challenges with our budget and looking at the different things to try and meet those goals, to support Medicaid, to support teachers, and to support the state employees. So there's always, we run a pretty tight ship, and so it will be a difficult year. But I'm not in favor of taxing people at this time and increasing taxes in any way. We had that brought up this last year in tax committee, and there's just a lot of reasons that we keep our taxes low. Advertising tax was brought up, and there's a lot of implications to that. So it seems simple, but at a time when people are struggling, increasing taxes is not the answer. So I would look at revenue streams and supporting Ellsworth, and then we'll take we may not be able to do the increases we want, but I think we'll be okay overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, would you like for me to read it again?
Go ahead.
What will your approach be to the state budget decisions that will likely require program cuts given the economic challenges as a result of COVID-19? What are your priorities for funding?
You know, there's no question, Mike and Jess alluded to the priorities issues and to the challenges that we're facing on it. You know, I see some light that we can use at the end of the tunnel on this, and we do need to consider them. That in terms of the key things that we're facing, the presence of Ellsworth and the B21 is going to help. In addition to that, I think we need to look at our rainy day fund and our lock boxes. But you know, beyond that, I want to talk for a minute about Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, because this could be a big piece of this. Beyond the obvious benefit of helping working people stay at work and get the health care they need, the fact is it'll push over $300 million per year into the state economy, revving up our ability to recover from the present economic downturn more rapidly. Had we gotten the $3 billion that the present leadership has left on the table over the past 9 years, we'd be in a lot better shape today. I don't want to have us continue down that old path. We can't afford that old path any longer. I know further that education is expensive, but it continues to be a whole heck of a lot cheaper than lack of skills in our workforce. As I'd indicated before, we need to be working on that. And so we need to keep investing for the future.
Rick, thank you. The next question we'll start with Jess, then we'll go to Rick, and then Mike. Jess, how would you represent minority populations, LGBTQ, Native Americans, etc., in your district?
Thank you for that question. And I think, when I look at legislation, I look at it, I think it's partly a libertarian streak of less government and less government intrusion. And when you look at that as a philosophy, then that starts to play down, and parental rights are important in maintaining the self-sufficiency of people. And in a lot of ways, that means that we don't interfere. And we had some difficult legislation this last year, in particular, one that became very heated and skewed that affected LGBTQ. And we had quite a bit of legislation around transgender and LGBTQ people. And I looked at a lot of that, and my approach to that was the same. Is this the role of government? And if we believe that we are conservatives, and as a Republican that I believe in less government, that's not the place. And so people felt that they wanted to push a moral position, but rather I look at that from the lens of our founders, of Abraham Lincoln. And I think that we rely on parents to make the right decision about their children. And if they can make those decisions, we don't intrude. And that it should be reflected in healthcare decisions, education decisions across the board. And I think that we also want to balance that. One of the key issues for the Native American population this year was the pipeline. And we definitely want to support communities and support our counties as a state when we have issues around funding for them. And if that arises like it did in North Dakota around pipeline rioting, but you also want to very much protect freedom of speech for any group. And so I looked at those pieces. And so I look at those fundamental rights first, and I make sure that when I look at legislation, it can meet that criteria, not just a personal position, but an overall view that is conservative and less government. Thank you.
Jess, thank you. Rick.
Thank you, Malcolm. When it comes to ensuring openness toward LGBTQ and to Native people and all other groups in our society, I just think it is absolutely critical that we maintain respect for and deep appreciation for all that people bring to our table and the openness of society. My wife and kids are Native, and I believe fundamentally in ensuring their rights and well-being in the society. When I see some of the things that have come out of the legislature that are single issue types of things that people jump behind and just engage in that are prejudicial against groups in the society, particularly what we've seen with the LGBTQ, but we've seen with other pieces of legislation that have gone on over time. I just think we waste time on those things, and we should be trying to guard against them and trying to move forward with the key things that are going to make our society better. So that's my thought on it.
Rick, thank you. Mike, same question.
Yes, I think we've all seen the trend in the last couple of years in regards to, well, the transgender issue specifically, but I think you can divide bills into those that are help the politician and bills that help the community. And you know what? I would rather help the community, the different communities, rather than bring legislation that's divisive or is felt discriminatory. Now, if I get my request, which is to be on appropriations, I'm going to talk to leadership and ask to be put on appropriations. To be quite honest with you, I will not be carrying a lot of bills. It's just fact of the matter is you can't carry a lot of bills when you're on appropriations. So I want to, if any bills that I get involved with will be to help the community. Now, Native American community, I have been involved with business down on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I understand the challenges. I've tried to create a tourism-based business, and it wasn't through barriers on the reservation. It had to be primarily with how the Europeans travel and how they move forward. So I'm been in business on the reservation. I understand the barriers, and anything I can do to remove them for the small business, I would do.
There we go. Our next question, we'll start off with Rick and then go to Mike and then Jess. I know we've already talked a little bit about funding and priorities, but if you could be specific, what are your top 2 priorities for legislative action if elected?
Okay, well, as I indicated, I don't see any opportunity that is bigger at this moment than bringing into the state money related to Medicaid expansion. I mean, how else are we going to get $300 to $400 million into the state economy in the next year? It would be crazy to not move in that direction. And I know I've talked to members of state government about this really since this issue was surfaced. You know, I've talked to Matt Michaels numerous times when he was lieutenant governor, and I was on the high-risk health insurance pool, and he repeatedly raised the issue of how are we going to pay for the 10% of the cost tied to the state has to pay in order to get that money. Well, we have to have faith that this is an investment because we need to move forward with it. Now, in addition to healthcare, as I mentioned, education, we have to look, though, at ways in which we might be able to manage costs and manage delivery of services better. One of the things that impressed me about Governor Dugard was a substantial success that he made in prison and sentencing reform. And maybe we could do even more. Let's look at trying to think about ways to do more rehabilitation and have shorter stays or alternatives to prison, as an example. Then we need to continue to look at education. And finally,
Thank you, Rick. Mike. You're on mute, Mike.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, top 2 priorities would be to balance the budget, obviously, in this brave new world we're in, to make sure we get back our economic engine, utilize some of the programs that Elevate has in place. And then the second priority is tourism-based. What can we do to get our tourism business back in order, back in place? We've got a lot of questions moving forward. This may have an impact for years to come. And agriculture's #1, tourism's #2, and one of my priorities would be to do whatever I can to help the tourism industry.
Mike, thank you. Jess.
Thank you for this question. So in addition to Ellsworth and the expansion with the welcoming of B21, which I think is going in coordinating that's going to take a couple of years and need to be a strategic support role from the state. So that'll require legislation over a couple of years. And that is going to be a priority for me because I think that just is a win-win-win across the board for the state, for the community, for the base, for our nation, really. So that'll be one of my priorities to continue to do that work. But another initiative that I had was an adoption fund in order to support families who are adopting into foster care and to put it not only both more on par with other states who will reimburse some of the costs for that, but it actually is a budget neutral solution. and it may in the long run save money, because when we are able to find those permanent homes for children who are up for adoption through foster care, then the state is able to, we as taxpayers not only have that child have a stable home and all of the benefits that come with that, but that reduces the cost of the taxpayers. So you have, again, a win-win. And my initiative had a lot of support from the governor's office and the departments, but it went in front of appropriations at a time when we didn't have very good news on the budget. So it was on the chopping block with a lot of other pieces. So my two priorities will be continuing some of the initiatives I've started, which is supporting Ellsworth and our military, and supporting families who want to adopt children in our community. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we'll move to our last question, and we'll start with Mike, and then we'll go to Jess, and we'll finish up with Rick. Why are you the best candidate for this position in the state legislature? What differentiates you as a leader in this community?
Well, thank you for that question. I'll circle back to the fact that I've served before in the House of Representatives, 3 terms. I can hit the ground running when I get there. I know the players. I've been active in peer over the years on different issues. My leadership at the Chamber of Commerce, I'm past chairman of the Rapid City Area Chamber of Commerce. And so I've listened to a lot of people, a lot of businesses, how we can move forward. I'm living it right now, just as all of us, trying to implement programs in my business to move forward. And so I understand those issues. My involvement with Ellsworth and the military, and I applaud Representative Olson for the summer study session, and I hope I can attend that as a fly on the wall and hit the ground running in regards to that next year. So grew up in Rapid City, know the market, know the district, love the people, would love to go back. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. And Jess?
Well, thank you for this question. And I think when I took the step forward to run and I said, what matters and how can I contribute? I looked at our state and we have a lot of good things going for us. You know, I've talked about the AAA bond rating that makes our pension stable. That's something that we have as an advantage over other states, but that takes a lot of fiscal leadership and maintaining that and not letting people take away from our reserves and the things that keep us stable for the future. We're a great place to retire. We're a low tax state. And we also have a good lifestyle so that your money can go further. But I also thought, and I looked at how we can contribute to the economic development and how we can move our state forward to be the best, not just for me, but for my kids and for their kids. And so that's really a priority that I have. And I feel like I have worked hard in this community, not only to be a longtime member of my church, of volunteer organizations, and serving on boards at the local and statewide level, but I took that and I leveraged that at the state when I became a legislator to get things done across the state, working with the chambers and our federal representatives so that we can move things forward. So I not only have a personal track record of leadership, leading businesses, turning a nonprofit around, helping more people, but doing that in my own small business. And I think that's the root of it, right? If we want to have the best state, we have to keep the focus on helping people. And I have a track record of doing that, and I'd like to continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rick?
Thank you, Malcolm. I love South Dakota. It has been a great home for my family and for me. I'm running for this office because fundamentally, I think we need some change in the legislature to help South Dakota reach its potential. My Republican opponents in District 34 are good people, and I consider Mike Derby to be a friend. But unless we change the mix in the legislature, it'll continue to be dominated by people without solutions for healthcare, education, and sustainable economic development. We can't afford to continue this, and the time for change is now. I know that as a new legislator, I won't be able to make these changes overnight, but I'll at least be there sharing another perspective on things. Medicaid, education, and business development. I've lived in Rapid City for 25 years and have raised my family and grandchildren here. I have experience on the issues we are facing, and I want to serve you with a commitment, hope, and betterment.
Well, thank you. I thank you all three for participating today. I said that was the last official question, and it is, but we still have at least 1 minute for each of you to have whatever closing comment that you'd like to make, or if there's something that you didn't cover, but you'll just get 1 minute to do that. And again, I'll flash the card at 30 seconds, and we'll start that with Jess.
Well, thank you. I said at the beginning, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve in the legislature. And I truly mean that. I appreciate every day when I hear from constituents about their issues. And, you know, I think that we have to keep in mind that we agree on a lot of things. And especially in our district, we have a lot of families, a lot of business owners, a lot of working professionals, and we have a cohesiveness. So there's a lot of common ground. And I appreciate the support of the district so that when we have ideas and opportunities that we can move forward. And I want to continue to move forward for you on Ellsworth expansion and education and making the best South Dakota we can.
Rick.
I've lived here a long time, and my family is deeply rooted in Rapid City. I've been blessed with jobs that have given me the opportunity to help people achieve their potential. It's funny, I used to work for a guy in Albuquerque before moving back here years ago, who was obsessed with finding and keeping only stars for the business. Unfortunately, there weren't enough stars he could define as stars, and I was able to help people succeed. They were good people. They were given the tools, the discipline, and the culture to give it their best. That's what we need to strive for here to be successful. I talked about healthcare and education. Obviously, a key driver in this also is economic and business development. I'm not looking desperately for the next best thing, but working with our resources in this community, the School of Mines and other centers of education, and our business incubator, Ascend, and other development investment. Get a lot of good.
Okay. And Mike. Mike, you're muted.
I don't show I'm muted. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Once again, I'd like to thank Malcom and Elevate for hosting this event. I had the pleasure of being chairman of Black Hills Vision, which was a predecessor to Elevate, and dealt with a lot of the big issues at the time. And I'm very excited to see Elevate be part of it. And I'd like to have them have a seat at the table. I would greatly appreciate going back to peer again. I bring my experience and I can hit the ground running. And I want to bring my family back. I want to bring my kids back to Rapid City and the state of South Dakota. So let's make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank all three of you. On behalf of myself and Elevate Rapid City, we thank you, the audience, for the time you spent hearing District 34 House candidates. We are also very, very grateful for Mike, for Jess, and for Rick for participating and sharing their perspectives with us today. Please keep in mind the date of the Republican primary election will be held between Mike, Jess, and Jody Fry. If you have any questions about voting or the elections, please reach out to Elevate Rapid City. We're taking a short break and we'll begin the session for the District 34 Senate candidates promptly at 4:15. You'll need to find the separate registration link for the Senate candidates, so refer back to your email inbox for that information. For those of you who have yet to register, please refer to the chat box where we posted the link to register the Senate session. Thank you all, and please be safe and be healthy. Thank you.